Here are the headlines for Monday morning, August 26, 2024. We are looking at Syria civil unrest regardless of who wins. Martin Armstrong fears post-election chaos. The Biden administration has been criticized for its dishonesty, including a recent revelation that the United States economy added 818,000 fewer jobs than initially reported in the year ending in March. Other examples of deception include claims that Donald Trump colluded with Russia, that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, and that COVID-19 vaccine injections are safe and effective. Martin Armstrong, an economist and analyst, says we are living in a period of great uncertainty, which is leading to a lack of confidence in the economy and causing people to save rather than spend. Armstrong also notes that polls showing Kamala Harris's approval rating as high as 40% are likely fabricated, with actual ratings closer to 8 or 10%. He predicts that Donald Trump will win the presidential election, but warns of serious civil unrest regardless of who wins. Are we headed for another Great Depression? Kamala Harris's proposal to cap food prices would likely encourage farmers to quit farming and lead to empty shelves in grocery stores. Giving more money to poor people through government debt could devalue currencies and make it harder for countries to import goods. In contrast, Donald Trump's policies, such as tariffs, might be helpful for parts of the United States with sufficient resources. A possible scenario is that the United States will break apart into two sections, a Trump section in the center and a Harris portion on the coasts, which would join with Canada and Europe to go to war with Russia and China. The Harris group would likely issue more debt, but struggle to be successful at war due to their limited ability to produce armaments without international trade. Pennsylvania judge rules Cornel West can't appear on ballot in key swing state. A court in Pennsylvania ruled that independent presidential candidate Cornel West cannot appear on the state's ballot for the 2024 election, citing his failure to submit required affidavits for 14 of his 19 presidential electors. The decision was made by Commonwealth Court Judge Renee Cohn-Jubilaer, who sided with the Secretary of State's office under Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro. West's lawyer argued that there was no good reason for him to be kept off the ballot, but it is unclear whether he will appeal the court's decision. University of Nebraska-Lincoln shuts down Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office, eliminates $320,000 vice chancellor position. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln is closing its Office of Diversity and Inclusion and eliminating the vice chancellor position for Diversity and Inclusion, held by Marco Barker, effective December. The decision will also redirect $750,000 back into the university's overall budget that was previously allocated to the office. Chancellor Rodney Bennett stated that a centralized approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion work is no longer suitable for the institution, citing a shift in trends among colleges and universities. Disney is killing its free streaming service and shutting down its American Broadcasting Company app. The Walt Disney Company is shutting down its ABC app on September 23, 2024, after building a free streaming service inside the app over the past year. The app had over 20 free channels featuring content from various Disney-owned properties, including ESPN. While there has been no official announcement on where the content will move, reports suggest that it may be transferred to the Disney app, which is expected to undergo an overhaul to include personalized promotional art and live channels dedicated to popular shows. Judge clears former police officers of key felony charges in Breonna Taylor's death. A federal judge has dismissed the most serious charges against two former Louisville police officers, Joshua James and Kyle Meany, who were accused of falsifying a search warrant that led to the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor in her apartment in 2020. The judge struck down an enhancement to the deprivation of rights charge, which would have elevated it to a felony punishable by life in prison or even the death penalty, finding that the direct cause of Taylor's death was her boyfriend's decision to fire at officers during a raid. While James and Meany still face up to 1 year in prison on the reduced deprivation of rights charge, they also face additional charges, including conspiracy and falsification of records, which could result in longer sentences if convicted. Secret Service rescinds protection for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. after Trump endorsement. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will no longer receive Secret Service protection after suspending his campaign in 10 battleground states to support former President Donald Trump instead. The Department of Homeland Security had previously granted Kennedy Secret Service protection following an assassination attempt on Trump's life, which resulted in the death of a former fire chief and injuries to others. As standard procedure, the Secret Service ends protection when a presidential candidate drops out of the race. Kennedy claimed that his repeated denials for Secret Service protection were political and part of a trend of federal agencies being weaponized to serve a political agenda. A teacher fired after alleged January 6th involvement wins wrongful termination lawsuit. A Pennsylvania teacher who was fired after being accused of attending the January 6, 2021 United States Capitol riot has won a wrongful termination lawsuit. Jason Moorhead, a 17-year veteran social studies instructor in the Allentown School District, maintained he was over a mile away at the Washington Monument when the riot occurred. Despite this, the district issued a news release stating an employee was involved in the protest and later terminated Moorhead after he refused to take a cultural sensitivity course. A jury awarded Moorhead $131,500 with 2 school board members liable for smaller amounts. There is no invasion by Ukraine on Kursk. The correct information is that Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Also, there are no records of any invasion by Ukraine on Kursk. Kursk is a city in Russia. However, if we were to rephrase the original title for clarity and grammar, 5 ways that an invasion of Kursk by Ukraine would actually harm American interests. Ukraine's invasion of Kursk may harm the interests of the United States in 5 ways. Russia might gain ground in Donbass due to Ukraine diverting forces from there. Diplomatic solutions become much more difficult after Ukraine invaded Russian territory, prompting Putin to rule out peace talks. Ukraine invaded Russian territory, prompting Putin to rule out peace talks. Ukraine might feel emboldened to expand the conflict into other areas like Islamic State. Inspired Syrian migrant confesses to triple murder at Festival of Diversities in Germany. A Syrian asylum seeker named Issa al-H has confessed to carrying out a knife attack at the Festival of Diversity in Solingen, Germany, that killed 3 people and wounded 8 others. Authorities said Issa was motivated by radical Islamist convictions and targeted perceived non-believers, repeatedly stabbing them in the necks and upper bodies. The Islamic State terror group claimed responsibility for the attack and posted a video showing Issa swearing his loyalty to the group's leader and vowing to kill as many non-believers as possible. The incident has intensified Germany's immigration debate ahead of critical elections in September, with center-right and right-wing parties calling for tougher controls on third-world immigrants. Fascism 2.0 Part 3 Feudalism 2.0. The author argues that the world is experiencing a new form of fascism, which they call Fascism 2.0, where corporate interests control national governments rather than the other way around. This has led to policies that benefit corporations at the expense of the poor, middle class, and small businesses. The author also discusses the use of large language models, LLMs, by social media firms to police content, and how this technology can be used to integrate with external agencies to monitor people's thoughts and behavior. They point out an article in the British Medical Journal that suggests using LLMs to combat vaccine hesitancy, which they see as a sign of the increasing control over communication and thought by power structures. The author finds this trend terrifying and believes it could lead to a new age of feudalism. Pope Francis condemns Ukraine's ban on country's largest Orthodox church. Pope Francis has condemned the Ukrainian government's move to ban the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which maintains communion with the Moscow Patriarchate. He emphasized that churches should not be touched and expressed concern for the liberty of those who pray. The Pope also stated that the state must not be involved in religion and that people cannot harm others simply by praying. This comes after President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a law targeting the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which has seen over 100 clergy members come under criminal investigation since the outbreak of war. Cornell University to offer a course on ecological justice focused on feminist, queer, and trans perspectives. Cornell University is offering a course called Ecological Justice, Feminist, Queer, and Trans Perspectives, which will present an in-depth study of ecological justice from these perspectives. The course claims that marginalized groups have led environmental movements and ecological theorizing globally, and it will draw on traditions such as ecofeminism and racial justice to show how these perspectives have reshaped environmental ethics. These are the countries committing the most aid to Ukraine. Ukraine receives the greatest support from the United States and European Union institutions, with approximately 52 billion euros in aid flowing into the country between January 24, 2022, and June 30, 2024. The majority of this aid comes in the form of military assistance, including donations of weapons and equipment for the Ukrainian army, as well as financial support linked to military purposes. Luxembourg and Finland offer their workers the most paid time off, United States and China not so much. Several European countries provide the most paid time off in annual business days, excluding weekends, national public holidays, and religious holidays. The top 10 countries are all found in Europe, with Luxembourg offering 26 days, followed by Finland, France, Sweden, Austria, and Denmark, each providing 25 days. In contrast, major economies such as China have only 5 mandatory paid time off days, which doubles after 10 years of work, while the United States has no countrywide minimum paid time off policy. 10 reflections on Ukraine after its latest Independence Day celebrations. The country of Ukraine, which means borderland, was formed from the heartland of Kievan Rus after its destruction by the Mongols and subsequent control by various empires. The national identity remains contentious between radicals who obsess over differences with Russia and moderates focused on socio-economic development. Despite having a rich industrial inheritance and generous subsidies from Russia, Ukraine's population has decreased from 50 million to 36 million people, making it the poorest country in Europe due to incorrigible corruption and deindustrialization. The color revolutions were co-opted by Western powers as part of a geopolitical power play against Russia, leading to Ukraine becoming a dictatorship with its sovereignty surrendered, industries sold out, and now serving as a neoliberal playground for the Western elite. Labor's North Sea windfall tax sparks industry backlash. The government of the United Kingdom plans to increase the windfall tax on energy companies, which could lead to significant job losses in the North Sea oil and gas industry, according to over 40 energy sector companies. The tax hike is intended to fund green initiatives, but industry leaders believe it will hinder investment in both fossil fuels and transition technologies, jeopardizing hundreds of thousands of jobs. The signatories warn that the levy risks widening the country's energy trade deficit and could lead to a decrease in domestic production, resulting in increased imports of crude oil and gas. Morgan Stanley, forget the convention. Here's what investors can hang their hat on into the 5th of November election. The presidential election years in the United States come with many traditions, including party conventions, where candidates are formally nominated and key policymakers make speeches about their vision for the country. However, investors may not learn much from these events that can impact how they navigate markets, as the information gleaned from conventions is primarily helpful for voters deciding how to cast their ballot. Vote for Harris if you want radical racial indoctrination of your kids. The author criticizes Donald Trump's campaign strategy, saying he would rather be crass than presidential and that his approach is not gaining him any votes. The author also notes that many Republicans are happy with the Trump campaign, but they should consider what would happen if Democrats gain complete control of the government. The author predicts a recession which could potentially help Trump's chances, but notes that it's uncertain whether it will be strong enough to make a difference. Additionally, the author mentions that Kamala Harris is pretending to be a moderate and that Trump is allowing her to get away with it by not discussing important issues like inflation and indoctrination in school. Fading the rally, hedge funds sell stocks at fastest pace since March 2022. Hedge funds have turned bearish again, selling and shorting stocks as the market extends its gains, according to Goldman's prime brokerage report. The funds had previously become briefly bullish after turning very bearish ahead of the late July swoon, but are now fading the rally once more. Boeing bounce. United States durable goods orders soar most since CEO VID after June doom. After June's Boeing-driven collapse, the United States durable goods orders strongly rebounded in July, jumping 9.9% from June's 6.9% plunge, the biggest month-over-month jump since July 2020's post-COVID lockdown bounce. However, excluding transport orders, they dropped 0.2%, and core orders were up just 0.6% year-over-year. Business equipment orders declined in July, and the prior month's gain was revised lower, suggesting firms are more guarded about investment. Global rally pauses as yields rise on surging oil. China's huge inventories of the material continue to draw down, suggesting that a period of severe oversupply is starting to ease. The United States economic calendar includes July preliminary durable goods orders and August Dallas Fed manufacturing activity. Federal Reserve speakers scheduled include San Francisco Fed President Mary Daly. Global markets kicked off the week mixed following gains on Wall Street after Fed Chair Jerome Powell's dovish pivot with Asia-Pacific stocks trading firm, but limited by losses in healthcare. European bourses have kicked the week off with marginal losses, and United States equity futures are mostly subdued at the resumption of trade. Customs and Border Protection's migrant app faces technical glitches, security flaws. A report by the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Inspector General found that the United States Customs and Border Protection's phone appointment app is plagued with technical issues and security vulnerabilities. The CBP One app allows immigrants to schedule appointments at ports of entry, but users have experienced application crashes, error messages, and language barriers. Despite processing over 765,000 individuals since its expansion in January 2023, the app's supporting infrastructure has security vulnerabilities that could be exploited by cyber attacks. The report recommended that CBP develop a formalized risk assessment process for mobile applications, analyze advanced information for trends and patterns of fraudulent behaviors, and assess applications and infrastructure for vulnerabilities. Where hedge funds and mutual funds agree and disagree, full positioning breakdown. Goldman Sachs portfolio strategy research team released 2 widely read reports last week, highlighting notable agreements and disagreements between hedge funds and mutual funds from a positioning perspective. Hedge funds diversified their cyclical exposure in the second quarter by adding to financials and industrials while selling consumer sectors. Mutual funds are now most overweight in financials, with an average of 147 basis points, and industrials with an average of 137 basis points, while being underweight in information technology. S&P 500 defying volatile currencies. The Japanese yen is not closed at this level since the violent market movie started a few weeks ago, currently trading below 144. The big trend line is slightly lower, and the 50-day moving average has crossed the 100-day moving average, with prices well below the 200-day moving average. This type of significant move in the world's third biggest currency matters.